So this is the area here from which this story seems to have emerged of global control. Caucasus Mountains seems to be very, very important. It keeps coming up in relation to many things, not least one of the origins of what we call today the white race. And it's interesting that in North America they call white people Caucasian. Why do they call them after some mountains in the Near East? Because whoever coined the phrase knew a lot more than he was telling. And it comes down, including Turkey, down what we now call Syria, Israel, Egypt, and round encompassing Iran and Iraq. Now these bloodlines, these hybrid bloodlines, were seeded all over the planet. And they work through all races. I'll get more into that in a little while, what exactly they are. But it's out of this area that the key lines came, which have manifested today as those who run the planet in banking, politics, business, etc. And out of this area of the world, peoples, overwhelmingly white peoples, came in various ways across land to take over in Europe. They went by sea earlier than that round to Britain. And what you find is that the key symbols of Britain and British culture, and of Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, did not originate in these islands at all. They all come from North Africa, because that's where the people came that brought that knowledge. And within these peoples, particularly within the white race, were these particular bloodlines that again and again, as you'll see, manifested as those in aristocratic, royal, and ruling power. This is the sun chair of George Washington, the first Freemasonic, massively high Freemasonic president of the United States. Of the 56 signatories to the American Declaration of Independence, 50 were known Freemasons, only one was known not to be. And what you start to realize as you get into this research is the Freemasons, and most Freemasons don't know their arse from their elbow in terms of what that organization is being used for, by the way. If we start throwing generalizations, it's the Freemasons, it's the this, it's the that, we've lost the plot. This is an organization working within organizations. The Freemasonic network is one of them. You start to realize that the Freemasons did not start in the 1700s, as we're told. That's when that particular mask on a face that can be taken back to the ancient world, to Babylon and beyond, used the name Freemasonry. Everything that Freemasonry uses in its ritual, everything, can be charted back to ancient Babylon and beyond. That's where they come from. It's just another name. So let's start our journey across what we call history. Out of this ancient Near and Middle Eastern area, where this phenomenal knowledge was and where these key bloodlines were seeded thousands and thousands of years ago, came overwhelmingly white peoples across land. And they changed their name from time to time, but when you do the research and follow the language and other common themes, you find that they were simply different names for the same peoples. But this took time to go across land. Earlier than that, around 3000 BC or before, an advanced people, again a white race, from this area, who history calls the Phoenicians, went by sea around Spain and up into what we call today Britain. And they took the North African culture and parked it in the British Isles. It has become the British culture, and of course, in its various forms, it's rapidly becoming the world culture. The Phoenicians have been marginalized by conventional history. Yes, the Phoenicians existed. Now let's get on to something that really matters. They are fundamental to understanding so much. Phoenician artifacts have been found in North America. Thousands of years BC, they went there. They've been found in Brazil. They have been found in Queensland, Australia. So, we had these peoples moving across in various ways to people the European continent. But within these peoples were these particular genetic lines that did not have an outward appearance of being different, but were genetically different. And it's these lines that manifested as the aristocracy and the ruling families of these European peoples as they became. And they interbred incessantly to hold this genetic structure, and they still do today. There's another group of Phoenicians which will bring us into the modern world. They went to North Italy, and eventually these Phoenicians became the Venetians, who created a maritime and financial empire that was immensely powerful. Among the key families there was one called the de' Medici family, one of the key ruling lines and families. The de' Medici family were the sponsors of Leonardo da Vinci, the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion. And as the night unfolds, you'll see more and more of these threads start to connect. The ruling lines of the Venetians became known as the black nobility, because what they did was invent aristocratic titles for themselves and take over aristocratic titles that already existed, and they got this nickname, the black nobility. As time unfolded, the black nobility moved up. They stayed here. This is why northern Italy and Switzerland are major Illuminati centers today. But some number of these lines moved up into Europe, into Germany, into Holland, and eventually one of these lines, called William of Orange, crossed the Channel and became King of England as William III in 1689. He arrived in 1688 and became king in 1689. What happened at that point is that he married Queen Mary, and they ruled as William and Mary. Because of the obsession with symbolism and ritual of the Illuminati, what was happening there? It was the symbolic fusion of these bloodlines that had gone by sea and earlier to Britain with the bloodlines that had come in this direction. And from that point, London and Britain became the epicenter of Illuminati operations. In the ancient world, it was Babylon. Then it moved to Rome, and when the Illuminati was centered in Rome, that's when we had the Roman Empire. And then when they moved to London, what followed that was the British Empire, which was not the British Empire at all, I now understand. It was the empire of the Illuminati, these bloodlines that had centered themselves in Britain, which is a very different thing. In 1694, not long after he became king, it was William of Orange who signed the charter that created the Bank of England, and the whole central banking system started to motor and emerge. So London became the epicenter. And through the British Empire, particularly the British Empire, but the other European empires as well, these bloodlines, this genetic structure that only they knew about until now, was exported all over the world, into the Americas, North, Central, South America, into Australia, into Africa, into Asia, as far as China, New Zealand. And people can go this far with me, and then they say, well, hold on a minute, I can follow you this far, mate. But those empires don't exist anymore, so it must be all over then. Not quite. I'm talking about the center of this Illuminati web that operates well beyond the level of governments. In 1776, or just after, the company that was created, headed by the British Crown, to run the American colonies, called the Virginia Company, it changed its name in 1776, or just after, from the Virginia Company to the United States. And the organizations and institutions that control the United States, the federal government level, the Federal Reserve, the privately owned Central Bank of America, the Internal Revenue Service that collects the taxation, etc., is controlled from Europe, particularly Britain. And yet, because of the image of America, no one will believe it. except it is documentably provable that that is the case. I mentioned that the Oppenheimers were the bloodline branch managers of South Africa. This is how it works. In London particularly, Europe in general, you have the epicenter of operational manipulation of the Illuminati, by the Illuminati. And then in the various countries, you have what I call the bloodline branch managers, who orchestrate the financial and political systems and institutions in their sphere of influence, in their country. And a decision comes down the line, it's like the spider in the center of the web here, comes down the line, and that bloodline branch manager family or families then introduce that agenda or that aspect of it in their own sphere of influence. In America, the bloodline branch managers are the Rockefellers, the Mellons, and what are called the Eastern Establishment families of the United States. And the story of Diana is also about genetics, about bloodline, and about wanting her bloodline fused with the Windsors. As she used to call herself to Christine Fitzgerald, she said, "I'm just the Windsor's brood mare," and that's all they wanted her for. Now, going along with these bloodlines, and I'll come back to that in a second when we get to the genealogy of the ruling families today, which is extraordinary. The bloodlines have worked through, in this period of thousands of years, a secret society network, which has helped to hide dramatically what's going on. Now, these bloodlines have changed their name from time to time, so people think, oh, well, they stopped there. They're always somebody else. They're actually the same bloodline. They've changed their name so we lose the plot. And the secret societies have done the same. Like I said earlier, the Freemasons have just changed their name. They've actually existed all the way through, but that offshoot just became known as the Freemasons in the 1700s. I'll give you an example of how this works. Around the time of the Crusades, 1200s, there were 3 knights organizations which emerged around the same time in Jerusalem, which are still going today and have among their number the top people in global politics, business, banking, military, etc. One of them was called the Teutonic Knights, which of course relate to Germany, and it was through that Teutonic Knight network in Germany that the Nazis were created to emerge in this century. And the third one, which I'm going to concentrate on for a few minutes, is the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar official story is that they were set up to protect pilgrims visiting the Holy Land. Well, there's 9 of these buggers for the first 9 years. They're going to protect a lot of pilgrims. Cover story. They parked their bums next to Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and after this 9 years, suddenly things started to motor very fast. A couple of them came back to France, where they were created by the St. Clair family, which became the Scottish Sinclair family. And suddenly they started to sign up and recruit some of the noble families of France and Europe. And to join the Templars, you had to give them your wealth and land, so they seriously knew something. As a result, the Templars became massively wealthy. And they had in Paris and London their 2 financial centers. And they made even more money by lending money that didn't exist and charging interest on it. The old scam played by these bloodlines all the way through to the present day. By 1307, the King of France, Philip the Fair, who was up to his neck in debt to the Templars, like the crown heads of Europe, just like the governments of the world are today. Same story, just a bigger version of it today. He issued secret orders, which weren't secret enough, to arrest the Templars in France on Friday the 13th in October 1307. That's why Friday the 13th has been considered unlucky ever since. Some of the Templars were arrested, most of them got away, and they went, because they had a massive fleet by this time, in 2 directions for sure, probably 3. The probably was to the Americas, because of the Phoenicians that went long before, among others. They knew in this underground stream of knowledge that the Americas existed long before Columbus